Saturday's Warrior.
Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. We got a good one for you tonight. We are previewing the BYU West Virginia matchup, and to do so, we got Tyler here from the Coal Country podcast to join us. I really appreciate it, Tyler. How you doing?
I'm good. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I really look forward to breaking this game down. I gotta say, actually, before we do, please like this video, subscribe to the channel. Also, Tyler, before we get too far, why don't you plug your content so everybody knows where to find you?
Yeah, me and two other guys, we have the Cold Country podcast on YouTube and Spotify. We talk everything West Virginia sports, basketball, football, and then we dip into obviously some Big 12 play and college football as whole. And then we're also pretty active on Twitter at Cold Country WVU.
Awesome. Do go check them out. What I was gonna say prior to the intros was, I've been to the previous two matchups between BYU and West Virginia. I'm on the East Coast, so I was there at FedEx. I was there in Morgantown 2 years ago. Obviously, they didn't go my way, but I had a very positive experience with the fans in both cases. Obviously, winning, you're not getting ridiculed too much. People were pretty nice about it, and but even showing up before the game, people were really nice, wanted to talk, and it was a lot of fun in both cases. So I know West Virginia sometimes can have a little bit of a reputation because I think what people see, what gets televised, is the pit games and things like that, but at least towards BYU fans, I've had positive interactions with the Mountaineer faithful.
Well, and I've got to give some credit to the BYU faithful, because I was at that 2023 matchup as well, and I got to say, for being in Utah, the fans travel well. There were quite a few BYU fans at that game, so got to give some props to the BYU fans as well.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there's some that fly out for it, but you're just getting, whenever there's an East Coast game, you get any of us that live on the East Coast, and we all gather. And I was at the ECU game, and as the game was over, people were leaving, somebody yelled out, "Hey, see you all in Cincy." So I don't know. I feel like a lot of the same crowd is going to make their way up to Cincinnati for that game. We'll see where we're at in the season at that point. It's cold sitting outside in Cincinnati. So that's a little bit more of a hike for me, but so let's talk a little bit about West Virginia before we really get into the nuts and bolts. Like, what the heck is going on in Morgantown?
That's a good question. Obviously, we're coming off of a coaching change first and foremost. So you're dealing with 80 new players incoming, which is the biggest turnover in the FBS, and so there's just a lot of question marks as a whole. And there even more question marks get raised when you've got so many injuries, which is what West Virginia's been dealing with. It came out earlier today that Nico Markiel, the starting quarterback to start the year, is now medical redshirting and is likely to transfer at the end of the year. You've had your running back 1 and your wide receiver 2 get injured with season-ending injuries. So just right now, a lot of newness, a lot of transfers that I think are still trying to find their way in a system that's not too difficult to get used to, but still new. And Rich Rod's just trying to rally the troops on what's been not the greatest start to a season. But at the end of the day, we're happy with where we are in terms of, we have a new coach. A change had to be made. We still got the win against Pitt this year when everybody expected us not to. So even though there have been some low lows, there's also been some high highs, and we're trying to take those high highs as we continue the season on.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I mean, everybody knew the coaching change was bound to happen. Did you think that Rich Rod was a realistic possibility before they even fired, before they were even officially looking for coaches? Would you have even put him on the short list?
Before, about halfway through the season was when everybody, started speculating that, okay, this might be Neil Brown's last year. Around that time, no, Rich Rod was probably not on my radar, and more so because I didn't think that Ren Baker would go in that direction, given the separation between Rich Rod and West Virginia in 2007. as the season went on, you started to see his name pop up. And then towards the end of the search, coming down those last couple of weeks, it felt like there was a top three, and it was Andy Kotelnicki, Rich Rod, and then the third person was kind of in between a couple of other guys. But he did start to become more and more popular. And then when it happened, it was a very mixed response from the fan base, because obviously you do have how he left in 2007. So some of the Mountaineer faithful weren't too fond of bringing him back in. But then the other half is, okay, he has brought us the most success out of any West Virginia coach outside of Don Nealon. And he's had us the closest to a national championship outside of Don Nealon again. So it was kind of a mixed bag. But yeah, he wasn't necessarily on my radar until those last couple weeks.
And so now that he is head coach, which side do you fall on?
In the moment, I wanted Andy Kotelnicki, the offensive coordinator at Penn State. But I think people undermine what Rich Rod was able to do at Jacksonville State. It's not easy coming up from the FCS level and then immediately competing for a conference championship, even if it is the CUSA. And so if you look at the success he was, able to find at Jacksonville State, I thought that it was a good move. Some people see it as a nostalgia kick. I'm not necessarily one of those people. I don't think it was out of nostalgia. I trust Ren Baker as an athletic director. He's made nothing but good hires thus far. And so as soon as he made that decision, I kind of fell on I agreed with the decision that Ren Baker made. And I like the decision the direction that the program is headed in.
Okay. So as you mentioned, we knew coming into this season, it would be a rebuilding year for West Virginia. On top of that, now there's all these injuries that you're talking about. And so what really is the direction for this team for the rest of the season? Obviously, things probably from the fan base, but from the outside looking in, things look fairly bleak for West Virginia for the rest of the year. What was already kind of a cobbled together roster, now depleted a little bit. And how does Rich Rod keep his team engaged? As you mentioned, you already have your starting quarterback looking to redshirt and then most likely transfer. Actually, quick side question. Do you feel like he's going to come down as like fans are going to be mad at him now that he's leaving, kind of banding him mid-season, or is the fact that he has 2 wins over Pitt going to outweigh that?
I think the 2 wins over Pitt outweighs it. Some of the best quarterbacks in West Virginia history can't even say that that's something they've accomplished. Nico was a loyal guy. He waited his time. He sat behind Garrett Green for several years. And so I think that among the fan base, it will be, a decision that we understand, not necessarily are frustrated about.
Okay. All right. Good to know. I meant to ask that earlier, but yeah. So to my question, how does Rich Rod keep this team engaged? What are you still playing for? Are you, and how does he keep them motivated and get the most out of this team while also preparing for future seasons?
Right now, I think you're just looking to, one game at a time, next play mentality kind of thing. I think the fan base and the team knows that you're not necessarily competing for a Big 12 championship. You're probably going to struggle to even compete for a bowl game. So what I think Rich Rod is looking for are his guys going out there and competing? Because despite it being a rebuilding year, there's a lot of seniors on this team. He brought in a lot of transfers that were seniors. And so the few young guys that we do have, are they making an impact? Are they going out there and competing on every play? Are they given 100% effort? Are they given that hard edge, so to speak, that Rich Rod likes to talk about? And so you're just kind of looking at the young pieces, what you can see moving forward, rather than, a record, what your record is going to be at the end of the year.
Okay. I do have a question. So I grew up not too far from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And so even though I've always been a BYU fan, obviously the local team, Michigan, was very prominent. And you may be well aware that Rich Rod went to Michigan. And something that I think, and I want your opinion on how you think he's doing right now on this job starting this West Virginia team and building this roster, because what I noticed when he went to Michigan is he had, this very old, Big Ten, ground and pound type of Michigan football team, and he showed up and his style was very different. It was the spread offense, and he wanted to go fast, and he wanted a mobile quarterback. And he had Ryan Mallett at quarterback, who, as talented as he was not really a mobile quarterback by any means. And so I felt like he was always trying to stick, a square peg in a round hole, and with that roster, and he struggled a bit until he started to get his guys, but by then it was too late, and things had kind of soured. So how do you see his approach with this team? Do you think he's doing a better job blending and meshing it together, or are you seeing a similar experience?
Well, that's almost kind of identical to how Nico started the season. Like you said, Rich Rod's systems are built around fast skill position guys, a mobile quarterback that can run the ball. And Nico's not necessarily that. While he's not afraid to take off and run the ball and lower his shoulder to get a couple yards, he's not necessarily the fastest guy. And so the system kind of struggled a little bit with Nico at the helm. Obviously, there's other problems as well. Right now, I think he's just trying to keep it simple. I wouldn't say he's necessarily trying to fit a square peg in a circle hole, so to speak. Right now, it seems more like he's just trying to figure out what he has, what the guys he does have, their capabilities are, and where, like I said, where he can go moving forward.
Okay. Well, hopefully he's able to get something going this year and get the program going in the direction that you guys are hoping for. I've had very positive experience with West Virginia fans. In fact, in Virginia, I often see just as much, if not more, West Virginia, bumper stickers or, things, stickers on the glass or whatever, than I do Virginia Tech or UVA even. And so a lot of West Virginia faithful out there. And so hopefully for your sake and the sake of the Big 12 that he's able to do that. So now let's get into the X's and O's just a little bit. Tell me real quick about how this offense is functioning, even now that you're down several players, and what is kind of the approach to this offense going forward?
You said it. We like to run the ball. It kind of is difficult to do when your wide receiver or running back one is out. But with we've seen Henderson and Khalil Wilkins both get some snaps at quarterback, and despite them not having the greatest of days, they are finding some success on the ground. And then I think that having Cam Vaughn at wide receiver is helping that as well. It opens up the pass game a little bit, but spread offense, they love to run the run option game. At the end of the Utah game, we saw Khalil come in. He made a couple right reads. There was a run towards the end of the game where Gerard Bowie kind of took it off on a sweep style play. So it's I think the biggest problem right now with the offense is the offensive line has really been struggling. And so when the quarterback does draw back to pass, they're not really giving them a lot of time. And then obviously it's kind of hard to run, in between the tackles when your offensive line is struggling to run block and pass block. We've had if you are familiar with PFF grades or how much you look into PFF grades, West Virginia has had one of the lowest PFF blocking grades in general, running and passing. So right now it's about just trying to stick to the basics, teach everybody the system that has worked for the past for Rich Rod. And some of the young guys have provided a little bit of a spark. Like I mentioned, Khalil Wilkins, Cam Vaughn, sophomore year player that is familiar with Rich Rod's system. He was at Jacksonville State last year. So just trying to figure it out. Run the ball is what it's been thus far. Okay.
And then on the other side of the ball, what is the identity of this West Virginia defense?
If there's one bright spot that has been for this year, is that the defense outside of tackling has played relatively well.
Well, I hear tackling is important for a defense.
Yeah, it's kind of contradictory, isn't it? The defense flies around. They hit hard. We've just had some tackling issues. Zach Alley loves to throw a lot of different looks at quarterbacks. Last week against Devin Dampier in Utah, he kind of tried to clog the passing lanes. But then we've seen in other games where he sends a lot of blitz packages. We've seen double bandit looks, and we've had some success with those, especially now that Jamori Robinson is fully back into the offense. We're hoping that he can take a next step against BYU. I know you guys are probably hoping that Jamori Robinson stays out of the backfield, but just flying around, hitting hard is the main. I would say, I don't want to say that's the identity, because that's kind of obvious. You want your defense to hit hard and fly around, but the defense has been the bright spot on this team, and it all starts kind of up front with Eddie Kelly, Eddie Vesterinen, Jamori Robinson back now. That's kind of the defense thus far.
Okay, so tell me, if West Virginia is to shock BYU this weekend, which could happen. I mean, it's the Big 12, it's college football, crazy things happen every week. West Virginia is not an untalented team. Obviously, you have a coach like Rich Rod back there. Team is playing, I imagine you guys are feeling your back is against the wall at this point in the season, and you have really nothing to lose but to go for it and give it your all. Obviously, flying cross country, BYU has done that quite a bit, except in this case, you're playing at a later time, pretty late time body clock, and playing up in the mountains, which I know you guys are Mountaineers, but I've gone running in West Virginia and I've gone running in Utah, and it is different, a different level in that regard. So there are some things going against West Virginia. That's just kind of setting the stage. And BYU's done really well at night games at home. Having said that, it wouldn't be the craziest thing to think West Virginia could come in and shock BYU. So if we're going to see that, what do we have to see go right as a whole? Like, what if you're telling me the game just ended, West Virginia won, what happened that allowed them to pull it off?
On defense, you've got to tackle better. BYU's got a premier back in the Big 12 in LJ Martin. He's averaging 5 yards per carry after contact. That's some ridiculous abilities right there from LJ Martin. And so you've got to tackle better on defense. And then on offense, you've got to see some improvement from the O-line. Last game against against Utah, we finally saw some second string reps. Malik Agbo, Donovan Haslam, and Carson Lee come in the game, and it felt like they provided a little bit of spark or a little bit of chemistry on the offensive line that has been struggling thus far. And so if West Virginia wants to run the ball, which they love to do, that's Rich Rod's entire system is quarterback either pull the ball or hand it off. If they want to do that, we've got to see some improvements from the O-line. So on defense, you got to tackle better, especially when LJ Martin has the ball in his hands. And on offense, you need to see some improvements from that offensive line. Okay.
All right. And to talk about West Virginia with grit and games that really matter, I just look back to that Pitt game. It was sloppy, and in many ways, you kind of kept Pitt in the game.
Yeah.
But found a way to grind it out and found a way to win, and which is awesome. I think all the Big 12 was with you right there, rooting for you to win that. And we know how BYU fans know all about playing in meaningful and very very intense rivalries, and especially even when it's out of conference. And so that's happened to us too, obviously with Utah. So that was quite the win. So I hope BYU, the team, I know the coaching staff is saying all the right things, but I hope the team's really bought in and locked in, because I do think West Virginia could do some things to make it tricky for BYU. Well, before I let you go, I do want to ask, because I'm kind of curious to get everyone's opinion going around the conference, because we saw recently that the SEC came out and announced that they would have some protected rivalries in their schedule going forward, which, with as big as our conferences are, we have very little continuity within who we're playing every year. It's hard to get traction with some of these rivalries like we were just talking about. So if from your perspective and kind of a West Virginia fan view, what three teams would you like protected for West Virginia every year on your schedule?
The first two, I think, are easy, simply because we're the only three out on the East Coast, and that's Cincinnati and UCF. Cincinnati goes back to the Big East days. While I wouldn't say they're in the top three in terms of West Virginia rivals, they are somebody that they're a familiar face, so to speak. And so Cincinnati is one, and then obviously UCF being on the East Coast in the same time zone. I think they make the most sense for that number two spot. Number three is a little more tricky. Um, I wouldn't hate to see TCU. For whatever reason, TCU and West Virginia seem to have every game that they play against one another, it's always close. You've kind of got to grind it out. It's whoever played harder is going to get the win, even if the team that lost was more talented. So I wouldn't hate to see TCU. Outside of that, it's a little difficult.
TCU is in the Big East for 5 minutes, so
Yeah, they were they were in the Big East for 5 minutes. So maybe that was a little precursor to what was to come.
And then who else? Sorry, you were going to say another school?
Oh no, like I said, it's tricky to name that third one. So if not TCU, maybe Iowa State. This one's less of a close or grinded out type of game on the field, but in the West Virginia Twitter community, there's the Cycloneers a meme that kind of gets passed back and forth. So maybe Iowa State or TCU, but that third one's kind of tough because you're out there. You, Cincinnati, and UCF are out there on your own on the East Coast.
I think, yeah, absolutely. It is tough. And obviously we'll see what happens as realignment goes on. Some people theorize that ACC will blow up and we'll grab some schools, which would be great for West Virginia, because the most likely candidates are schools that you have some history with. But I think it's interesting because when Cincinnati was added to the Big 12, I think it was a lot of people's assumption that, oh yeah, West Virginia, Cincinnati, they're pretty close together and they were both in the Big East together, that you guys would hop on to, having each other as rivals. And not anyone I've talked to on West Virginia or the Cincy side has really been like, you've all been kind of like mum on the whole rivalry between the two schools. Like the juice just is not there. Do you see that picking up at all? Do you feel like now that you're in conference and had some games against each other that it'll start picking up more? Or is it still just kind of like, yeah, we're rivals, but
yeah, I definitely know what you mean. I think the problem is because historically they're, like I said, they're not in the top three that West Virginia would consider their main rivals. West Virginia has the series with Pitt, and that's by far the most heated, Virginia Tech being a close second. And so I think the proximity kind of just, makes everybody assume, and then the Big East ties makes everybody assume that, hey, these guys are rivals. A heated series could develop. I could see it becoming a more heated rivalry as time goes on, if no other excuse me, I can't even talk. If no more Eastern side schools are added. But like you said, if the ACC does end up blowing up and, we add maybe Pitt or a Louisville or a Virginia Tech, I still see West Virginia favoring Pitt, Virginia Tech as their primary rivals over Cincinnati.
oh yeah, sure. The history there for sure. So anyway, well, I hope for the sake of the conference, it turns into something, just because it's more fun when schools, have that little added juice and something to look forward to. But yeah, so far it just does not seem to be there. Maybe you guys just like each other too much or something. I don't know, but and looking back on it, because from my memory, it was like I felt like, oh yeah, West Virginia and Cincy were in the Big East together forever, but it really wasn't that long. It was just that's what from the time that I was really paying attention on, they were, and so I just kind of always had that connection. But it really was, I want to say, like 10 or so years that they were in the Big East together, give or take some. So it really wasn't that long of a history to build up that rivalry. But I just find that fascinating. It's a kind of one of the many terrible parts of all this realignment that we've seen over the many years, is losing these rivalries. And I do think it's a big deal to have that continuity from season to season. Now, BYU and West Virginia, we've played each other back-to-back years, but I don't remember now when the next. I doubt we play again next year. So, actually, I think we might. I know we play again at least in West Virginia in the next 1 or 2 years, because I remember looking at my schedule saying, "Hey, I'm going to have to circle that on my calendar." So, so I can make it out to a game. Yeah, it's not next year, so it must be 2027. Which, my word, yeah,
We don't even know what the conferences will look like by then.
Yeah, exactly. So you're saying I shouldn't buy my tickets yet? Okay, well, good deal. Well, Tyler, thanks again for joining me. Again, follow Tyler and the Cole Country Podcast. I'll leave links in the show notes below. Be sure to go follow him and his content to get more on the Mountaineers. And also like this video, subscribe to the channel. We'll keep these videos coming to you each week as we prepare for our matchups with the various teams throughout the conference, and to get a little insight into who the opponents are. So thanks again, and thanks for watching. And as always, go Cougs.